The Partition of India was a monumental event that reshaped the map of South Asia. It happened in August 1947, at the very same moment that India gained its independence from British rule. This was not just a political change. It was a deep and painful division of a land that had been united for centuries. The British Indian Empire was split into two new independent nations. One was a Hindu-majority country called India. The other was a Muslim-majority country called Pakistan. This division was not simple. It carved through provinces, villages, and even homes, creating new international borders where none had existed before. For millions of people, the concept of home was about to change forever, often with devastating consequences. The decision to partition British India was the result of a complex mix of political pressures and religious tensions. The British were preparing to leave India after nearly 200 years of colonial rule. As independence drew near, the question of who would govern the new nation became critical. The Indian National Congress, led by figures like Jawaharlal Nehru, wanted a single secular India for all. However, the All India Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, feared that in a united India, Muslims would become a powerless minority. They demanded a separate homeland for Muslims to protect their political and cultural rights, a nation they would call Pakistan. The British, eager to depart from a land they could no longer control, ultimately agreed to this plan of division. The task of creating these new borders fell to a British lawyer named Sir Cyril Radcliffe. He had never been to India before and was given only 5 weeks to draw the lines that would separate the two new countries. These lines, known as the Radcliffe Line, were drawn through the large provinces of Punjab in the west and Bengal in the east. The borders were drawn based on religious majorities in districts, but the population was often mixed. Villages where Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs had lived together for generations were suddenly split. People woke up one day to find that their homes, fields, and even their families were on the wrong side of a new international boundary. This hasty and poorly planned process set the stage for one of the greatest human tragedies of the 20th century. The announcement of the new borders was delayed until after independence was officially declared on August 15, 1947. This decision had catastrophic consequences. When the lines were finally made public, millions of people discovered they were now minorities in a new country. Hindus and Sikhs on the Pakistani side and Muslims on the Indian side were gripped by fear and uncertainty. They worried about their safety, their property, and their future. This fear quickly turned into a massive, panicked migration. People left their homes with only what they could carry, hoping to find safety across the new border. This sudden uprooting of millions was chaotic and unplanned, leading directly to the violence and suffering that would define the partition. The idea of dividing India along religious lines was not new, but it gained powerful momentum in the final years of British rule. For decades, the Indian independence movement had been a united front against colonialism. However, political disagreements began to emerge between the major parties. The Indian National Congress envisioned a single, unified and secular India where people of all faiths could live together. They believed that a shared national identity would be stronger than religious differences. This vision was championed by leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru, who worked tirelessly to keep the country together and prevent a split based on religion. They argued that dividing India would betray the very spirit of the freedom struggle. On the other side was the All India Muslim League and its leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The League argued that Muslims had a distinct cultural and political identity that would be threatened in a Hindu-majority India. They believed that after independence, the Hindu majority would dominate the government and society, leaving Muslims without a voice or protection. This fear was encapsulated in the two-nation theory, which stated that Hindus and Muslims were two separate nations who could not coexist peacefully in a single state. Jinnah and the Muslim League campaigned relentlessly for the creation of Pakistan, a separate homeland where Muslims could govern themselves and preserve their way of life. This demand became a non-negotiable point in the final discussions about independence. The role of the British in this process was significant and remains a subject of debate. Many historians argue that the British policy of divide and rule had over many years intentionally deepened the divisions between religious communities to make it easier to govern the subcontinent. By creating separate electorates for different religious groups, they institutionalized religious identity in politics. As their empire weakened after World War II, the British were in a hurry to leave India. They saw partition as the quickest, albeit most brutal solution to the political deadlock between the Congress and the Muslim League. Their haste to withdraw, without a proper plan for the transition, contributed directly to the chaos and violence that followed. The plan for partition was finally agreed upon in June 1947. Lord Mountbatten, the last British Viceroy of India, announced that the British would leave much sooner than expected, setting the date for August 15, 1947. This rushed timeline left very little time to organize the division of assets, military forces, and most importantly, to manage the population transfer. The decision was made with little consultation with the people who would be most affected. The focus was on the political transfer of power at the elite level, while the human dimension of dividing millions of people was tragically overlooked. This lack of foresight and planning turned the dream of freedom into a nightmare for countless individuals caught in the crossfire of history. The immediate impact of the partition was a human catastrophe on an unimaginable scale. As soon as the new borders were announced, fear and violence erupted, especially in the divided provinces of Punjab and Bengal. Mobs, fueled by religious hatred and a desire for revenge, attacked people from the minority community. Entire villages were burned down, and trains carrying refugees were ambushed and their passengers massacred. Law and order completely broke down in many areas, as the newly formed governments of India and Pakistan struggled to control the situation. For ordinary people, the world turned upside down overnight. Neighbors who had lived peacefully side by side for generations suddenly became enemies, and trust was replaced by terror. This widespread violence triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history. It is estimated that between 10 and 15 million people were forced to leave their ancestral homes and move across the new borders. Hindus and Sikhs living in what was now Pakistan fled eastward to India, while Muslims in India traveled westward to Pakistan. They traveled by foot in long, slow-moving columns called by overcrowded trains and by bullock carts. The journey was filled with danger and hardship. Many died from starvation, disease, or exhaustion. Many more were killed in violent attacks along the way. The roads and railways became scenes of immense suffering, a testament to the brutal reality of the division. One story that captures the human tragedy is that of Ajit Kaur, a young Sikh girl at the time. Her family lived in Lahore, a city that became part of Pakistan. She remembered the fear as riots broke out and her family had to hide in their home. They eventually had to flee, leaving everything behind. They joined a convoy of refugees heading for India, a journey marked by constant fear of attack. Ajit saw terrible violence and lost friends and relatives. Her story is one of millions, each filled with personal loss and trauma. These individual experiences show that partition was not just a political event. It was a deeply personal tragedy that tore families and communities apart, leaving scars that would last for generations. The loss was not just physical, it was also emotional and cultural. People lost their homes, their land, and their possessions, but they also lost their sense of belonging and their connection to their heritage. A farmer in Punjab had to leave the land his family had farmed for centuries. A woman in Bengal had to leave the river and village that was central to her identity. Families were separated during chaos, and many people were never reunited with their loved ones. The violence was particularly brutal towards women who faced abduction and assault on a massive scale. The partition left a deep wound on the psyche of the subcontinent, a collective trauma of displacement, loss, and unspeakable violence. The legacy of the Partition of India continues to shape the subcontinent more than 75 years later. The most immediate and lasting consequence was the creation of a hostile relationship between India and Pakistan. The two nations have been locked in a state of conflict and suspicion ever since 1947. They have fought several wars, many of them over the disputed territory of Kashmir. which was itself a casualty of the poorly managed division. The borders that were drawn in haste have become heavily militarized frontiers, symbols of the enduring division. This political tension has defined the foreign policy of both countries and has had a profound impact on the lives of people living in the border regions. For the millions who lived through it, the memory of partition is a story of profound personal loss. The generation that witnessed the violence and displacement carried the emotional scars for the rest of their lives. These memories have been passed down to their children and grandchildren, becoming part of family histories. Stories of lost homes, separated families, and the horrors of the journey are still told in households across India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, which was originally East Pakistan and became independent in 1971. These personal narratives are a powerful reminder that history is not just about dates and politics. It is about the lived experiences of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. In recent years, there has been a growing movement to preserve these memories and ensure that the human stories of partition are not forgotten. Organizations like the 1947 Partition Archive have been collecting oral histories from survivors, creating a digital record of their experiences. Museums and art exhibitions dedicated to partition have opened in both India and Pakistan, providing a space for people to learn about this difficult chapter of their shared history. These initiatives are important because they shift the focus from the political decisions of leaders to the human cost of those decisions. They give a voice to the voiceless and honor the suffering of millions. Remembering the Partition of India today is crucial for several reasons. It serves as a powerful warning about the dangers of religious intolerance and political division. It teaches us that borders drawn on a map can have devastating real-world consequences for human beings. By studying partition, we can better understand the complex history of South Asia and the roots of the conflicts that persist today. Most importantly, remembering the stories of the survivors helps us to empathize with the victims of displacement and violence everywhere. It reminds us of the importance of peace, tolerance, and the shared humanity that connects us all. A lesson that is as relevant today as it was in 1947.